안녕하세요, 몽땅입니다. 지난 시간에 채식에 대해 배웠던 것 기억나나요? 몽골은 척박한 땅과 긴 겨울으로 인해 채소를 접하기가 조금 더 어렵다고 해서 몽땅이 수경재배기 프로젝트를 시작하게 되었어요. 지난 수경재배 소개 시간에 우리가 어떤 수경재배기를 만들기로 했는지 기억나나요? 바로 리사이클링 수경재배기인데요. 주변에서 쉽게 접할 수 있는 재활용품으로 수경재배기를 만들어 볼 거예요. 어떤 재료들로 수경재배기를 만들 수 있을지 아직 고민인 여러분들을 위해 몇 가지 영상을 준비했어요. 영상을 통해 수경재배기에 대해 배웠던 내용을 다시 한번 떠올려보고 영상 속에 등장하는 수경재배기들을 참고해서 나만의 수경재배기를 만들어 봅시다.
I, like many of you, am one of the 2 billion people on Earth who live in cities. And there are days, I don't know about the rest of you guys, but there are days when I palpably feel how much I rely on other people for pretty much everything in my life. And some days that can even be a little scary. But what I'm here to talk to you about today is how that same interdependence is actually an extremely powerful social infrastructure that we can actually harness to help heal some of our deepest civic issues if we apply open source collaboration. A couple of years ago, I read an article by New York Times writer Michael Pollan, in which he argued that growing even some of our own food is one of the best things that we can do for the environment. Now, at the time that I was reading this, it was the middle of the winter, and I definitely did not have room for a lot of dirt in my New York City apartment. So I was basically just willing to settle for reading the next Wired magazine and finding out how the experts were going to figure out how to solve all these problems for us in the future. But that was actually exactly the point that Michael Pollan was making in this article, was it's precisely when we hand over the responsibility for all of these things to specialists that we cause the kind of messes that we see with the food system. So I happen to know a little bit from my own work about how NASA has been using hydroponics to explore growing food in space, and that you can actually get optimal nutritional yield by running a kind of high-quality liquid soil over plants' root systems. Now, to a vegetable plant, my apartment has got to be about as foreign as outer space, but I can offer some natural light and year-round climate control. Fast forward 2 years later, we now have window farms, which are vertical hydroponic platforms for food growing indoors. And the way it works is that there's a pump at the bottom which periodically sends some of this liquid nutrient solution up to the top, which then trickles down through plants' root systems that are suspended in clay pellets, so there's no dirt involved. Now, light and temperature vary with each window's microclimate. So a window farm requires a farmer, and she must decide what kind of crops she is going to put in her window farm and whether she's going to feed her food organically. Back at the time, a window farm was no more than a technically complex idea that was going to require a lot of testing. And I really wanted it to be an open project because hydroponics is one of the fastest growing areas of patenting in the United States right now and could possibly become another area like Monsanto, where we have a lot of corporate intellectual property in the way of people's food. So I decided that instead of creating a product, what I was going to do was open this up to a whole bunch of co-developers. The first few systems that we created, they kind of worked. We were actually able to grow about a salad a week in a typical New York City apartment window. And we were able to grow cherry tomatoes and cucumbers, all kinds of stuff. But the first few systems were these leaky, loud power guzzlers that Martha Stewart would definitely never have approved. So to bring on more co-developers, what we did was we created a social media site on which we published the designs, we explained how they worked, and we even went so far as to point out everything that was wrong with these systems. And then we invited people all over the world to build them and experiment with us. So actually now on this website, we have 18,000 people, and we have window farms all over the world. What we're doing is what NASA or a large corporation would call R&D, or research and development. But what we call it is R&DIY, or research and develop it yourself. So for example, Jackson came along and suggested that we use air pumps instead of water pumps. It took building a whole bunch of systems to get it right, but once we did, we were able to cut our carbon footprint nearly in half. Tony in Chicago has been taking on growing experiments like lots of other window farmers, and he's been able to actually get his strawberries to fruit for 9 months of the year in low light conditions by simply changing out the organic nutrients. And window farmers in Finland have been customizing their window farms for the dark days of the Finnish winters by outfitting them with LED grow lights that they're now making open source and part of the project. So window farms have been evolving through a rapid versioning process similar to software. And with every open source project, the real benefit is the interplay between the specific concerns of people customizing their systems for their own particular concerns and the universal concerns. So my core team and I are able to concentrate on the improvements that really benefit everyone. And we're able to look out for the needs of newcomers. So for do-it-yourselfers, we provide free, very well-tested instructions so that anyone, anywhere around the world can build one of these systems for free. And there's a patent pending on these systems as well that's held by the community. And to fund the project, we partner to create products that we then sell to schools and to individuals who don't have time to build their own systems. Now, within our community, a certain culture has appeared. In our culture, it is better to be a tester who supports someone else's idea than it is to be just the idea guy. What we get out of this project is we get support for our own work as well as an experience of actually contributing to the environmental movement in a way other than just screwing in new light bulbs. But I think that Eileen expresses best what we really get out of this, which is the actual joy of collaboration. So she expresses here what it's like to see someone halfway across the world having taken your idea, built upon it, and then acknowledging you for contributing. If we really want to see the kind of wide consumer behavior change that we're all talking about as environmentalists and food people, maybe we just need to ditch the term consumer and get behind the people who are doing stuff. Open source projects tend to have a momentum of their own. And what we're seeing is that R&DIY has moved beyond just window farms and LEDs into solar panels and aquaponic systems. And we're building upon innovations of generations who went before us. And we're looking ahead at generations who really need us to retool our lives now. So we ask that you join us in rediscovering the value of Citizens United and to declare that we are all still pioneers.
The last time you went shopping in a grocery store, did you stop and think about where your food came from? Is it from a farm? Where is it? How far is it from you? In the US, over 90% of lettuce is grown in just 2 states, California and Arizona. It has to be transported across the entire country to the East Coast where we are. By the time we get it, it's no longer that fresh or nutritious anymore. And we think about food and where we grow food. Yes, California has the right climate for growing lettuce, but it'll be so nice if we can grow food anywhere, anytime, so we can enjoy fresh, local food anytime and no matter where we are. Over 80% of people in the US live in urban areas, but not many of us think about food availability or food safety unless something goes wrong. At the beginning of the pandemic, we all saw empty shelves in grocery stores. People were stockpiling food. Our food supply chains were fragile, and they just couldn't keep up with our demand. Over the years, we've also seen E. coli outbreaks leading to recalls of romaine lettuce grown outside in soil in California. And sometimes, we also find some unpleasant surprises, such as this fly I found in a baby spinach bag saying thoroughly washed. And this spinach was also grown outside in soil. So with all these problems, can we find a way of growing food without soil? Yes, we can. Growing food without soil is a technique called hydroponics, which combines two Greek words. Hydro means water, ponos means work or labor. Together, it's working with water. We can actually grow plants directly in nutrient water without soil. This may sound counterintuitive, but plants don't need soil. They need the water and nutrients, which we can provide to plants directly. With hydroponics, we can reduce, reuse, and recycle our nutrient water to save precious water and reduce runoff. In fact, hydroponics can help us save over 90% water compared to traditional agriculture outside in soil. We can grow hydroponic food anywhere, anytime. We just need to grow in a greenhouse or indoor farm. We can control light, temperature, humidity, and nutrient water for optimal plant growth. This is why indoor hydroponic crops have much higher yields compared to crops grown outside in soil. The greenhouse or indoor environment is also a physical barrier that protects plants from natural disturbances such as harsh weather and pests. And even if pests can find their way in, we can use beneficial insects to prey on them. This means no pesticide. Because plants are grown under protection with no soil, they're clean and ready to eat. There's no need to wash. We can have hydroponic farms in or near the city so fresh vegetables can reach local consumers right after harvest. Land in the city, though, is expensive and hard to come by. But we can build rooftop hydroponic farms right in the city on top of buildings. Or we can grow hydroponic food under lighting inside vacant warehouses, also in the city. This is indoor vertical farming, where we vertically stack hydroponic trays to save space. Just outside the city, we can also find cheaper land to grow local food and supply it directly to people living in the city. And nowadays, we can already see a lot of fresh hydroponic leafy greens and tomatoes in our grocery stores nearby. Hydroponics brings farming close to us, so we get to enjoy fresh, local, and healthy food no matter where, no matter when. It connects us to the food we eat. Besides supporting local hydroponic farms, we can actually grow some hydroponic food ourselves right at home. At the beginning of the pandemic, I was living in an apartment and I was craving a connection to life and nature. So I started growing hydroponic greens on my apartment windowsill with reused plastic containers. I found a reused tofu container to sow lettuce seeds in an insulation material called rock wool. I watered the plants with tap water and a water-soluble fertilizer. There was not much that I had to do to keep the plants alive. 2 weeks later, when the plants got a little bit bigger, I moved the plants to the openings of milk bottles, which I put on the windowsill. This window was facing the east, so there was plenty of sunlight in the morning for plants to grow and thrive. It was a very simple setup all of us can do. It was a lot of fun to watch plants grow over time and eventually enjoy some clean and delicious veggies for soups and salads. It was also very helpful for my mental well-being on the lockdown. After I moved into a house last year, I continued to grow hydroponic greens on my windowsill. And this time, I was using a window box or planter. I filled the window box with nutrient water. I also found some used styrofoam food trays and cut small holes in them to put in small plants. Then, roots grew into water to absorb water and nutrients. It was a very self-sufficient system that I didn't have to do much at all before harvesting the greens. There was extremely low maintenance. It was also something really nice to look at on my windowsill. Besides window boxes and milk bottles, I also experimented with other types of household plastic containers, such as pickle jars and milk bottles. It was a great way to reuse household plastic containers and reduce plastic waste. As an assistant professor at the University of Delaware, I teach and research hydroponic food production in greenhouses and indoor farms. In my Delaware Indoor Ag Lab, or DIAL, my team experiments with environmental factors such as light to see how we can improve crop yield and nutritional value. We're growing a wide range of crops such as lettuce and peppers. And our goal is to help hydroponic farmers grow more with less. We're trying to find the optimal light, temperature, humidity, and other conditions for these plants that we eat. On top of that, we also work with NASA to help fine-tune how astronauts grow hydroponic food on the International Space Station for space exploration. And this is no longer science fiction that we saw in the movie The Martian. It is reality. It's quite exciting. We can grow hydroponic food anywhere, anytime, in our home, greenhouses, indoor farms, the International Space Station. We can start with something simple like this, a DIY home hydroponic shelving unit that we can all build ourselves right at home. It's a great way to connect with food, appreciate the food we eat, teach our family and friends about food, and eventually enjoy some delicious, clean, and fresh greens that we grow ourselves very proudly. And this is the ultimate farm-to-table experience. Thank you.
영상을 보고 나니 리사이클링 수경재배기를 만들 수 있는 재료들이 떠오르나요? 저도 플라스틱 배달용기를 이용해서 리사이클링 수경재배기 만들기에 도전해봤는데요. 재료만 준비돼 있다면 10분 만에 뚝딱 만들었을 정도로 쉽고 간편하게 완성할 수 있었어요. 리사이클링 수경재배기를 만드는 모습을 영상으로 담아봤는데요. 함께 보실까요? 이건 한 달 반 정도 전에 구매한 수경재배기인데요. 상추는 매일 재배해도 새롭게 자라나고 흙에서는 키우기 어려운 로즈마리도 이렇게 잘 자라고 있답니다. 제가 만든 리사이클링 수경재배기의 재료를 소개할게요. 가장 중요한 플라스틱 용기, 치약, 배양 스펀지, 배양 스펀지를 고정시킬 트레이, 영양분이 가득한 배양액, 그리고 플라스틱 뚜껑을 자를 칼과 가위가 필요합니다. 가장 먼저 플라스틱 뚜껑에 트레이를 꽂을 수 있도록 구멍을 만들어 줄게요. 저는 빼뚤빼뚤한 구멍이 되었지만 가능하면 예쁘게 뚫어주면 좋겠죠? 구멍을 다 만들었다면 트레이가 잘 들어가는지 확인해봅니다. 오늘은 청치와 상추를 심어볼게요. 그리고 씨앗을 넣어줄 건데요. 구멍마다 1개에서 3개 정도를 넣어줬어요. 하지만 상추는 발화율이 높아서 1개씩만 넣어도 될 것 같아요. 이제 배양액을 넣은 영양소를 만들어둬야 하는데요. 배양액통에 희석 비율이 적혀 있어서 쉽게 만들 수 있답니다. 이 플라스틱 배달용기에는 1리터 조금 넘는 양의 물이 들어가서 1리터에 맞는 양인 5ml씩의 배양액을 섞어줬어요. 영양소를 부어주고 뚜껑을 닫고 배양 스펀지 트레이를 꽂아주면 수경재배기 완성! 해가 잘 드는 따뜻한 창가라면 이렇게 UV 조명 없이 창가에 두어도 되고, 난방이 잘 되는 방에 햇빛을 대신할 조명을 설치해 두어도 좋아요. 어때요? 생각했던 것보다 간단하지 않나요? 여러분도 함께 리사이클링 수경재배기를 만들어서 채소를 키워보면 어떨까요? 11월 15일이 무슨 날인지 알고 계신가요? 바로 몽땅팀과 만나는 날. 리사이클링 수경재배기를 각자 만들기보다는 함께 만들면 더 좋을 것 같아서 시간을 마련해봤어요. 여러분이 꼭 준비해두어야 할 것은 수경재배기를 만들 재활용품입니다. 영상에서도 봤듯이 두부 포장, 우유병, 플라스틱 그릇 등 다양한 재료로 수경재배기를 만들 수 있어요. 몽땅팀은 여러분을 만날 생각에 너무너무 설레는 마음으로 준비를 하고 있어요. 여러분만의 리사이클링 수경재배기를 만들 재활용품을 꼭 준비해주세요. 여러분만의 개성 있는 수경재배기를 기대하겠습니다.